"We need leaders who drive visible impact." That was the line. It came from a 32-year-old VP who had been with the company for maybe 8 months. And it was directed at me. I was sitting at the far end of the conference table, hands folded, listening to the CFO walk through a slide deck about compensation realignment. It was late in the afternoon, around 4:40 p.m., the kind of meeting everyone just wants to get through. No one expected anything major. Then my number came up. "Daniel," the CFO said, not even looking at me, "your leadership bonus will be adjusted to 0 this year under the new structure." Adjusted to 0. Just like that. 8 years of consistent performance, and my $28,000 bonus disappeared in a sentence. No warning. No conversation before this. No explanation that made sense. Just alignment with new performance models. I remember the room going quiet for half a second. Not shocked. Just careful. Like everyone understood something had happened, but no one wanted to react. I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. Not the HR director. Not the operations team. Not even the people who used to come to me when things broke at 2 a.m. They all just looked at their laptops. Then the VP leaned forward. "We're focusing on measurable visibility now," he said. "We need leaders who can clearly demonstrate impact across departments." That was the second hit, because I knew exactly what he meant. I didn't present. I didn't make slides. I didn't sit in front of clients talking strategy. I built systems. I fixed problems before anyone noticed them. I kept things running so smoothly that no one ever had to ask how. My work was invisible by design, and now that invisibility was being used against me. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded once like it made sense. The meeting moved on in less than 30 seconds. Next slide. Next person. Next discussion. Like nothing had just happened. I sat there for the rest of the meeting, listening without hearing. Numbers, forecasts, projections. It all blurred together. But in the back of my mind, something was shifting. 8 years. I had joined this company when it was unstable, when systems were breaking every week and clients were leaving. I had been promised something simple back then. Stability, respect, growth. Not overnight success. Not flashy titles. Just steady progress. And I had to deliver my side of that deal. Every year, every crisis, every late night. And now, sitting in that room, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. None of that mattered. Not in this version of the company. Not with this leadership. To them, I wasn't the person who kept things running. I was a line item, a cost that could be adjusted. I remember the exact moment the meeting ended. Chairs moved. Laptops closed. People stood up quickly, like they had somewhere more important to be. No one said anything to me. Not even a "we'll talk later." I stayed seated for a few seconds after everyone left, just looking at the empty chairs. And that's when it hit me. Not anger. Not frustration. Something quieter. Clarity. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't thinking about how to fix something. I wasn't thinking about how to make things work. I was thinking about what would happen if I stopped. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 47 years old, and for 8 years, I was the operations director at a mid-sized logistics company that depended more on its systems than it ever admitted. When I joined, the company was barely holding together. Deliveries were late. Vendors didn't trust the payment cycles. Clients were already looking for alternatives. Internally, everything was reactive. People spent more time fixing problems than preventing them. That's where I came in, not as a savior, just as someone who understood how systems were supposed to work. I didn't start with big changes. I started with small ones, cleaning up vendor contracts, standardizing timelines, building simple processes that reduced errors. Then I connected those pieces: supply chain tracking, payment systems, compliance checks, reporting structures. It took time. Months turned into years. But slowly things stabilized. Then they improved. Clients stopped complaining. Vendors started offering better terms. Internal teams stopped working in panic mode. Most people never noticed the shift. That was the point. If I did my job right, nothing dramatic happened. No fires. No breakdowns. No urgent calls at midnight. Just consistency. And consistency is quiet. I worked long hours, especially in the first 4 years. There were nights I stayed at the office until 1 a.m., not because anyone asked me to, but because I knew if I didn't fix something, it would turn into a bigger problem later. My wife used a joke that I had two homes, the house and the office. We have a daughter. She's in high school now. Back then, I missed more dinners than I'd like to admit. School events, weekend plans. I told myself it was temporary, that once things stabilized, I'd get that time back. And in some ways, I did. But the cost was already paid. The bonus I lost in that meeting wasn't just extra money. It covered my daughter's school fees. It helped manage the mortgage when interest rates went up. It was part of how I justified everything I had given to that job. But over time, my role changed. I stopped being just an operations director. I became the person people called when something didn't make sense. Clients trusted me directly, not the brand, me. There were two major accounts that stayed with us because I personally rebuilt their service structures. They didn't care about presentations or executive speeches. They cared that things worked, and I made sure they did. Inside the company, I built systems no one else fully understood. Not because I wanted control, but because no one else wanted to get into the details. It was easier to let me handle it. So I did, for years. Then leadership changed. A new executive team came in about a year ago. You could feel the difference immediately. They talked about growth, visibility, and positioning. They introduced new reporting formats, more dashboards, more meetings. Everything needed to be presented, measured, and explained. They valued what could be seen, not what quietly worked. The VP from that meeting was part of that shift. Smart, polished, confident. He spoke well in meetings, used the right terms, made things sound impressive, but he didn't understand the systems. Not really, and that didn't seem to matter. Because in that environment, perception carried more weight than reality. That's when I started to feel it. Not just pressure, distance. Like the work I had built was slowly becoming invisible. And in that meeting, when they cut my bonus without hesitation, it wasn't just about money. It was confirmation. I wasn't part of their version of value anymore, and they had no idea what that actually meant. The changes didn't happen all at once. They came in layers. At first, it was small things. New reporting formats. Weekly review meetings that used to be monthly. Requests for visibility into processes that had been running fine for years. Then came the restructuring. Departments were merged. Titles were changed. New roles were created with names that sounded important but didn't clearly connect to anything real. That's when they brought him in. Ethan Blake, 29 years old, MBA, clean resume, perfect delivery. His title was Head of Strategic Operations. On paper, he was above me. In reality, he didn't understand the systems he was supposed to oversee. But that didn't stop anyone. I was asked to train him. Not officially. There was no email that said it directly. But I started getting calendar invites. Walk-through sessions. Knowledge transfers. System overviews. So I did what I've always done. I explained things clearly. I walked him through vendor dependencies, contract cycles, system triggers. I showed him where things could break and how to prevent it. He nodded a lot, took notes, asked the right questions. But there's a difference between understanding something in theory and knowing how it behaves under pressure. And he didn't have that. The first real mistake came about 3 weeks in. A vendor contract renewal was mishandled. A clause was overlooked. It wasn't a big issue at first, but it had the potential to delay shipments across 2 regions. I caught it before it escalated. Fixed it quietly. Didn't mention it. That became a pattern. Things would slip. Small at first, then bigger. And I would step in. Not to protect him. To protect the system. Because if the system failed, it wouldn't matter who caused it. The damage would spread. But while I was doing that, something else was happening. I was being pushed out of conversations. Meetings I used to lead, I was now optional for. Decisions about processes I built were being made without me. I would find out after the fact, usually when something didn't work. I started sending reports again. Clear, simple summaries of what needed attention. No response. Sometimes I get a short reply from Ethan. Noted, or we're aligned. But nothing changed. I raised concerns directly once in a meeting. Just facts. No emotion. I pointed out a timeline issue that would affect a client delivery. Explained the risk. Suggested a fix. The VP looked at me, then at Ethan. Let's not overcomplicate this, he said. We need to stay agile. Agile. That was the word they used when they didn't want to deal with details. After that, I stopped pushing. Not because I agreed, because I could see how it would be framed. Resistance. Lack of alignment. Not a team player. That label sticks fast once it's applied. So I adjusted. I kept doing my work. Kept fixing things quietly. But I stopped trying to be heard in rooms that had already decided not to listen. And that's when I started to see the real problem. It wasn't just that they didn't value what I did. They didn't understand it. They thought the systems ran because they were well designed. They didn't realize they ran because someone was constantly watching, adjusting, correcting, because I was. And without that, things wouldn't fail immediately. They would drift, slowly, then all at once. By the time we got to that meeting where my bonus was cut, I already knew something wasn't right. But sitting there, hearing that decision, seeing how easily it was made, it confirmed something deeper. The company was now being run by people who didn't know what was holding it together. And I was the only one still doing that work. I didn't say anything after the meeting. I packed my laptop, nodded to a few people in the hallway, and walked out like it was any other day. The drive home was quiet. No music, no calls, just the sound of the engine and the same sentence repeating in my head. Adjusted to 0. Not the amount, the meaning behind it. 8 years, reduced to nothing in a room where no one even looked at me. By the time I got home, it was already dark. My wife was in the kitchen. My daughter was at the table, working on something for school. Everything looked normal. That almost made it worse. I sat down, asked about her day, listened to her talk about a test and a group project. I responded the way I always do. Calm, present. But my mind was somewhere else. After dinner, I went into the study, closed the door, opened my laptop. For years, that laptop meant work. Fixing something, checking something, preventing something. That night, it was different. I didn't open email. I didn't check reports. I opened the systems I had built, one by one. Vendor contracts, logistics workflows, client communication threads, internal escalation paths. I wasn't reviewing them as an employee. I was looking at them as someone outside. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. How much of it depended on me? Not officially, not on paper, but in practice. There were triggers only I monitored, relationships only I managed, decisions I made every day without thinking, because I knew what would happen if I didn't. If I stepped away, nothing would collapse immediately. It would take a few hours, maybe a day, then things would start to slip. A missed update here, a delayed response there, then the chain reaction, and the people now in charge. They wouldn't see it coming, not until it was already happening. I leaned back in my chair and sat there for a long time. Not angry, not even frustrated anymore, just clear. For 8 years, I had protected the company, protected systems, protected people, even protected leadership from mistakes they didn't realize they were making. And in return, I had just been told, in a room full of people, that my contribution had no measurable value. So I asked myself a simple question. What happens if I stop protecting them? Not out of revenge. Just stop. The answer was obvious. I opened a new email, typed in HR, then the CFO, then the VP. Subject line, resignation. The message was short, professional, no emotion. I am resigning from my position, effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity over the past 8 years. That was it. No explanation, no argument, no defense. I read it once. Then I hit send. No hesitation, no second draft. Just done. I closed the laptop and sat there in the quiet. For the first time in years, there was nothing to fix, nothing to monitor, nothing to prepare for. Just one clear thought. Tomorrow, the system runs without me. And this time, I wasn't going to step in. I woke up the next morning at 6:30 out of habit. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then I remembered. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check overnight alerts. I just sat there, looking at the ceiling, waiting for the usual pressure to kick in. It didn't. That was new. By 7:15, my phone started buzzing. First, a missed call from HR. Then an email notification. Then another call, this time from Ethan. I let it ring. Got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table like it was a weekend. My wife noticed something was off. "You're not leaving?" she asked. I resigned. I said simply. She paused, trying to read my face. Last night, I nodded. There were more questions in her eyes, but she didn't push right away. She knows me well enough to understand when I've already made a decision. By 8:30, The calls were coming in back to back. HR again. The CFO. A few team members. Messages started stacking up. Can you confirm this is real? Let's talk before anything is finalized. We need a transition plan. I still didn't respond. I wasn't trying to make a point. I just wanted to see what would happen if I wasn't there to catch things early. By 10 a.m., the first crack showed up. A vendor I had worked with for years sent me a direct message. Daniel, we received conflicting instructions on the renewal. Can you confirm? I stared at the message for a few seconds. That contract renewal had a timing clause. If handled wrong, it could delay shipments across 2 regions. I knew exactly what had happened. Someone pushed it through without checking the dependencies. I didn't reply. Around 11:30, Ethan called again. This time I answered. Daniel, I just saw your email, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I think we should talk. There are a few things we need clarity on. A few things. I almost smiled. What kind of clarity? I asked. There was a pause. Well, some of the vendor timelines and the logistics reset protocol. We're seeing some inconsistencies. Of course they were. That documentation is in the shared drive, I said calmly. We checked, he replied. It's not complete. It was complete, just not simple. You'll figure it out, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel, we really need your help here. That was the first time the tone changed. Not authority. Need. I'm no longer with the company, I said. I'll send a formal response later today. I ended the call. By early afternoon, things are picking up speed. Emails started coming in from clients. One of the larger accounts asked why their shipment updates had stopped syncing. Another asked for confirmation on a delayed schedule. Inside the company, I could imagine what it looked like. Confusion. People trying to piece things together. Questions being asked in meetings with no clear answers. And at the center of it, Ethan, trying to lead something he didn't fully understand. At 3 p.m., I finally responded. Short. Professional. I confirmed my resignation. Then I added one more line. I'm available for limited consulting support at a revised rate of $250 per hour with a minimum engagement block. No emotion, no explanation, just terms. Within 20 minutes, I got a reply from the CFO. Let's discuss. Just like that. The dynamic had shifted. Not completely, but enough. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one adjusting to them. They were starting to adjust to me. And the system? It had only been one day, and it was already beginning to show where the pressure points were. By the second day, it wasn't just cracks anymore. It was movement, the kind you can't ignore. I still hadn't logged into any company system. I stayed out completely, but the calls kept coming. This time, they weren't just from HR or Ethan. The CFO called me directly. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up. Daniel, he said, voice tighter than I'd ever heard it. We need to talk. We can talk, I said. What's the issue? There was a short pause, like he was deciding how much to say. We're seeing some operational disruptions, he admitted. A few processes aren't functioning as expected. A few processes. I'll let that sit for a second. What do you need from me? I asked. We need you to come in, at least temporarily. Help stabilize things. There it was. Direct, clear, and very different from the tone in that meeting. I'm not coming back as an employee, I said. Understood, he replied quickly. We can structure something short-term, just to get things back on track. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel the silence, not as punishment, as reality. I sent my consulting terms, I said finally. If those work, we can move forward. They do, he said almost too fast. That told me everything I needed to know. By the third day, I started hearing from people still inside. Old colleagues, people I trusted. They weren't calling officially, just checking in, but they told me what was happening. Meetings running long with no clear direction. Teams blaming each other for missed deadlines. Clients escalating issues that no one could explain. The VP trying to regain control, pushing for quick fixes that didn't address the real problems. And Ethan struggling, not because he wasn't capable, because he didn't have the experience. He didn't know where to look, didn't know which issues mattered and which ones could wait. That kind of judgment takes years. You don't learn it from a report. You learn it from being there when things break. I listened to all of it without reacting. No satisfaction, no anger, just confirmation. This wasn't personal anymore. It was structural. For years, I had been absorbing the pressure, adjusting things before they reached the surface. Now that layer was gone, and everything underneath was being exposed. On the fourth day, the CFO sent over a formal consulting agreement. Signed. Approved. No negotiation. They didn't try to lower the rate. Didn't question the terms. They just needed access. And I understood why. Because by that point, it wasn't about efficiency anymore. It was about control. They were losing it. And for the first time since I joined the company, they knew it. On the fifth day, I got a call I didn't expect. It wasn't from the company. It was from one of our biggest clients, Mark Reynolds. He managed operations for a national retail chain. We had worked together for over 4 years, not through meetings or presentations, but through problems. Real ones, missed shipments, system failures, tight deadlines. We had built trust the hard way. Daniel, he said, his voice direct as always. I've been trying to get clear answers all week. What's going on over there? I leaned back in my chair. I resigned, I said. There was a pause, then a quiet. That explains a lot. He didn't sound surprised, just certain. We've had 3 delays in 2 days, he continued, and no one could tell me why. That's not how you run things. I didn't defend the company, didn't explain anything. That's not my call anymore, I said. Another pause. Let me ask you something, he said. Are you still involved in any way? Consulting, I said. Limited. Good, he replied without hesitation. Because if this keeps up, we're going to have to rethink the contract. There it was. Clear, direct, no emotion. A multi-million-dollar account on the edge. And not because of market conditions. Not because of competition. Because the system wasn't being managed. I understand, I said. I'm not trying to pressure you, he added. But you were the reason this worked. Everyone knows that. That line stayed with me. Not because it felt good. Because it was true in a way the company had never acknowledged. My value was internal. It wasn't in a performance review. It wasn't in a bonus structure. It was in outcomes. In relationships. In the fact that when things got complicated, people trusted me to make them simple again. After the call, I sat there for a while, just thinking. For years, I had measured my value by how the company saw me. That meeting, that bonus cut, it made it clear how limited that view was. They weren't wrong about one thing. My impact wasn't visible, but not because it didn't exist, because it was never meant to be seen. It was meant to work. That afternoon, I reviewed the consulting agreement again. Then I sent a confirmation. I would step in, temporarily, not as an employee, not as someone trying to prove anything, just as a professional doing a job, on clear terms, clear boundaries. And this time, the structure was different. I wasn't inside the system anymore. I was outside it, which meant I could see everything clearly. And more importantly, so could they. I went back in the following Monday, not through the main entrance, not with a badge, just a visitor pass and a signed agreement. It felt different the moment I walked in. Same building, same people, but the weight was gone. No expectations, no pressure to prove anything. I wasn't there to belong. I was there to fix what needed fixing. And that's exactly what I did. I started with the vendor contracts, cleaned up the renewal errors, reset the timelines, then moved to the logistics system. There were 2 key triggers that had been missed. I restored them, adjusted the flow, and stabilized the tracking. Next, I spoke to the client teams. Not long meetings, just clear instructions. What changed? What needed attention? What to expect next? Within 2 days, things started to settle. Not perfectly, but enough to stop the damage. The calls slowed down. The escalations dropped. Clients stopped asking the same questions. And internally, the tension eased. Not because the system was strong again, but because someone who understood it was guiding it. The difference was obvious. No one said it directly. They didn't need to. You could see in the way people spoke. Careful, measured, respectful in a way they hadn't been before. Even the VP. He kept his distance. And when we did speak, his tone had changed. Less confident, more cautious. Ethan was different too. Quieter, listening more than talking, trying to learn what he had stepped into. I didn't hold anything against him. He was put in a position he wasn't ready for. That wasn't his fault. But the system didn't care about that. It only responded to what worked. After 2 weeks, everything critical was stable. The client Mark called again. This time his tone was calm. Things looked better, he said. Back to normal. Good, I replied. You staying on? He asked. No, I said. Just finishing up. There was a short pause. Well, he said, whatever you do next, I'm going to feel it. I didn't respond to that. I didn't need to. On my last day, I wrapped up the final handover notes. Simple, clear, not everything, just enough. Because now, they knew what it meant to not have me there. That was something no document could teach. I handed in the visitor pass at the front desk, walked out of the building the same way I came in. No announcement, no farewell, just done. As I reached my car, I stopped for a moment, looked back at the building. 8 years. A lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, but also a lot of clarity now. Loyalty without respect isn't stability. It's just delay and silence. Silence doesn't protect your value. It hides it. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't take revenge. I just stopped holding things together for people who no longer valued what that meant. And once I did, everything became visible, not just to them, to me. And that was enough.